Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. Today's project is this arcade machine style box, which has a lid at the top like so. It's 6 inches tall and 3 inches across at the widest point. So without further ado, let's put the project together. We'll start by making the sides of the box, and you can either make a template and draw around it. We will be doing lots of pencil marks, so think about whether you want to go straight in with your base cardstock or not first. The starting cardstock is 3 1/8 times 6 inches, and I'm making the sides so that the length of each of the angled sections, etc., works in full 1/8 of inches. So consequently, the way that I put this together is going to be slightly unorthodox, but hopefully when we come to put the box together, you'll see why I've done it this way. So along the top 3 1/8 of an inch edge, I'm going to make a pencil mark at 1 1/2 inches, 1 3/4 inches, and 3 inches. Move down to the bottom and make a pencil mark again at 1 1/2 inches, 1 3/4 inches, 2 7/8 of an inch, and 3 inches. And some of these lines are just going to be so we can make sure we've got our ruler vertical. You could do this in your scoreboard if you prefer. And I'm going to line my ruler up with the first 1 1/2 inch mark at the top and the bottom, and just faintly draw a pencil line from top to bottom. Do the same on the 1 3/4 inch pencil mark. Then at the 3 inch mark, I'm going to line the ruler up top and bottom, but I'm just going to draw a pencil line down the top 1 inch like so. So this is the top front of our arcade piece. I'm going to turn my piece in this orientation just because it's easier for me to work. I'm going to line my ruler up with the 2 7/8 of an inch mark. So it's going to be the second mark here. And I'm going to rotate my ruler until the 2 1/4 inch mark is on that pencil mark at the bottom, which is now on the right hand side. And rotate the ruler until the top of my ruler meets the left-hand edge of the cardstock. So the length of this line here is 2 1/4 inches. Rotate my piece back. We're now going to use the top of the mark that we've just made. I'm going to line the 1 1/2 inch mark up with the top of that pencil line, and just rotate my ruler until the top corner of my ruler hits this 1 3/4 inch vertical line, like so. So the length of this line here is 1 1/2 inches. So the next thing we want to do is on the 1 1/2 inch vertical line, measure down 1 1/4 inches and just put a mark on the line. And then I'm going to turn my piece into this orientation just so it's easier to work. Line my ruler up with the end of this 1 inch line here across to the pencil mark that we've just made. I'm going to put the 2 inch mark at the end of this line. Rotate my ruler around so that it intersects with the pencil mark. And I'm going to draw a pencil line in 1 1/2 inches long. So it won't quite reach this line here. It'll be just inside it, but the length will be 1 1/2 inch long. So the length of this here is 1 1/2 inches. And then we're going to join up the end of that pencil line with the end of this pencil line. And it should be 2 inches. By putting in these vertical pencil lines, it's given us something to aim our measurements at. It's meant that the sides all the way around the machine are full inches or 1/8 of an inch. So we've got a 3 inch, a 6 inch, a 2 7/8 of an inch, 2 1/4, 1 1/2, 2, 1 1/2, and 1. Now, obviously you can now, you've got that as your basis, change any of the angles or any of the shapes. So you might decide that you want this to come more over that way. You might want a sharper angle across this bit. And all I would say is try to, where you can, make your measurements so they're full 1/8 of an inch, so that it doesn't mean when you add your strips around the outside you have to work on 1/16. So this is the shape of our arcade machine. If this is your base cardstock, you want to do that again, so you've got a left and a right, and obviously rub out any of the pencil marks that are left behind. If this is your template, you'll cut this out and draw around it on your base cardstock to give you the left and right hand side of the machine. So I'm going to cut this out and use it as a template. So this is my base cardstock. I'm going to line up the bottom corners so I've got, can use the straight sides where they are available, and draw around my template. So if you imagined that this was pattern paper and this was single-sided, this is going to be the left-hand side and my pattern paper is going to be on the outside. So what I'd want to do is flip this over and draw around it again with my template in this orientation, because that then means that the pattern paper is going to be on the outside and it will be the right-hand side of my box. So I'm now going to cut those out, and that's going to give me the two sides of my box. I won't discard of my template because I can go around each of these edges and trim away a border and then use that once again as a template on my pattern paper. So I'm going to cut these out next. So the next thing we want to do is create the side sections. So I'll just bring in my template that's got the measurements on. Now I'm going to make my box so that the top element is where the lid is. So this piece here would be loose and would have a tab on it to fit down inside the box. I'm going to make my boxes 3 inches wide, so each of my side sections are going to be 4 inches, and they will be scored at 1/2 and 3.5 inches. So we'll work out the length of the cardstock that we're going to need. So all the sections will be 4 inches wide, scored at 1/2 and 3.5. And obviously, as I said, you can change up the width of the box if you so wish. So our first piece of cardstock will be 6 plus 2 7/8. So that's 8 7/8 plus a 1/2 inch for a glue tab. So that will be 9 3/8 times 4. And that's going to be for A and B. Then we've got 2 1/4 plus 1 1/2 plus 2 plus 1 1/2 plus 1. So that's 8 1/4 times 4. So that will be for C, D, E, F and G. So the last section will be 1/2 plus 3 plus a 1/2. So that will be a glue tab. So that will be glue tab plus H plus a tab. So that will be 4 inches times 4 inches. So I'll just bring in this for the measurements. So we've got A and B, so that's 6 plus 2 7/8 plus a glue tab, which is 9 3/8 times 4, and that's scored at 6 and 8 7/8. We've got C, D, E, F and G, so that's 2 1/4 plus 1 1/2 plus 2 plus 1 1/2 plus 1. So that's 8 1/4 times 4, and that's scored at 2 1/4, 3 3/4, 5 3/4, and 7 1/4. And then finally we have the section across the top for the open the lid, which is the glue tab plus the length of the top plus a tab. So that is 1/2 plus 3 plus 1/2. So that gives us 4 times 4, which is scored at 1/2 and 3 1/2. And as I said earlier, all of these pieces for my box are 4 inches wide, and that's going to be scored at 1/2 and 3 1/2. So if you change up any of the pieces to change the angle of your side piece, remember that you're going to have to change up your lengths and adjust the lengths of these pieces accordingly. And you can, of course, also, if you choose, change up the placement of the lid. You might, for instance, want to have so that this front opens here, or you might want to have this section here opening. So you'll just need to adjust the lengths of your strips accordingly and take that into consideration when you add your strips onto the side of the box. So this is my first strip, 9 3/8 times 4, scored at 1/2 and 3 1/2 along the short side. And I'm going to score all of the pieces in line with the measurements on this piece here. We'll take our pieces, fold and burnish along all of the score lines. The process for this, adding the strips in, is basically going to be the same if you've seen any of the number boxes that I've made. To prepare our pieces, we'll start with the longest piece, and I'm going to hold it in a portrait orientation and remove the bottom left and right intersecting squares, like so. And we're basically going to treat each of the pieces the same. We'll take a wedge from the glue tab, which is going to join the strips together, and then I'm going to cut up the 1/2 inch score lines in the side sections and shape the glue tabs. And what I recommend is, as you prepare each piece, you bring in your side. You want to just check that your glue tabs are going to go around and not be interfering with one another. So I can see as that sits on there, they're going to be overlapping, which I would prefer they didn't. So I'm just going to reshape those a little bit more so that there's no conflict on the inside, and the sides are going to sit on nicely like so. So that's much better now. Bring in the second piece. This one doesn't have any end glue tabs, so we're going to cut up each of the 1/2 inch score lines within the side sections and create our side glue tabs as we did on the first strip. So let's check these. These are going to fit around the front. So this is going to be this way round with the largest panel at the bottom. So I'm just going to sit this in and just make sure as I roughly bring this round. So you might want to manipulate this into shape at the same time. So this is going to come around like so. This score line is going to come back, and this one is going to come on the top. And I can see that none of my tabs are interfering with one another, so I'm quite happy with those. And then the final section, we're going to remove all of the intersecting squares. I'm going to take a wedge from one of the tabs. This is going to be our hinge. The tab opposite is going to be the flap that goes down inside the front of the box. And these two you can either decide to remove, or you can leave them in so they fit down inside the box as well. I'm going to leave these in place, but what I am going to do is round off the corners of each of the remaining 3 flaps. And that's just because that is my preferred look for a box. So the only thing left for me to do is bring in my longest strip, and I'm just going to use my circle punch and cut a finger notch in the long side section, just so that it's easier to get in and out of the box. So now it's just a case of adding the sections in. You might want to add all your pieces together as one long strip first, and then work your way around your side section. There is no right or wrong way. You may think you're going to struggle with a piece of cardstock this long, so you might want to add on one section at a time. So I'm going to bring in my first piece. Obviously, if this was pattern paper, you would have pattern side down. And I'm just going to start adhering the side sections onto one of the sides. So I'm going to stick this first side into place. I'll use my construction glue because it will just give me a little bit more wiggle room. Do make sure that you've thoroughly burnished the side tabs, these sections, because you will find it does give you a neater finish. I'm going to sit this in like so. Now, before I stick this next section in, I'm going to add the next strip of cardstock. So it will be this piece with the multiple sections, and we're going to be adding in to the longest side. Glue this one on. So next we can continue to work our way around. Now, if you do get any overhang and you're finding you're not able to quite square off your side sections, don't worry, because what you can do at the end is you could just go in and trim along with your craft knife or your scissors once everything's dry to tidy that up. So I've got to the end of this section, and now before I stick this piece into place, I'm going to bring in my lid and I'm going to add my lid on to the end of the strip. Now I can add in the last tab and secure that into place. You can see that my lid is going to come across and sit in like so. So once that's done, I'm going to move that lid completely out of the way, and then I'm going to go around, add my glue to my tabs and stick the second side section on the top like so. My second side is sat on the top. My lid is going to come across and will sit in the top like so. So once this is dried, I've got a slight misshape piece here. You can just see I've got some overhanging there. So once it's fully dried, I'll go in with my craft knife and just trim that off. But apart from that, there's just a tiny piece there. This has come together and it's fitting together really nicely. So the next thing to do, the fun part, is think about your decoration. So I'm going to go ahead and decorate my box, and then I'll come back and go through all the various measurements with you. Here is the finished box. You can see I've added a message on the top section here and on the section here. Just added some embossed cardstock and a rocket and two aliens here for to indicate the game. And then I've used Nuvo drops to create the buttons. I cut down a cocktail stick and just added a red bead onto the top, and that's created the joystick. I've stuck that onto the paper with a glue dot and then used black Nuvo drops to go around the outside just to finish the look and to hold the joystick in place at the same time. I'll give you the sizes for the papers that I've used. So I did, as I suggested, cut down the template and use that to create the pattern paper for the two sides. The back is 5 3/4 times 2 3/4. So we'll work from the top down the front. So the top piece is 2 3/4 squared. The front section here is 2 3/4 times 3/4. The section under here is 2 3/4 times 1 1/4. The piece for this section is 2 3/4 times 1 3/4. This section is 2 3/4 times 1 1/4. And then this piece is 2 3/4 times 2. And then I have another piece on top, which was 2 1/2 times 1 3/4. So there we have the project for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.